Labrīt visiem tiešraides skatītājiem, kas ir pievienojušies izaugsmes programmas otrajai lekcijai. Mani sauc Ance Āboliņa, un es esmu SEB bankas inovāciju vadītāja, kā arī izaugsmes programmas vadītāja Latvijā. Izaugsmes programmas ietvaros mums ir 4 publiskās lekcijas. Un šodienas lekcija ir veltīta klientam, viņa vajadzību un problēmu izzināšanai. Un šīs lekcijas ietvaros mēs pievērsīsimies tam, kādas var būt metodes, lai labāk saprastu mūsu klientu. Aicinu arī jūs aktīvi iesaistīties un uzdot jautājumus komentāros, kurus pēc tam es uzdošu mūsu šīs dienas lektorei. Lektore mums ir Tallinas Tehnoloģijas Universitātes lektore un arī šīs programmas partnere no Rethink, Jana Kuka, un lekcija būs arī angļu valodā. So I'm welcoming Jana on the stage along.
Hello.
I will give floor to you to give the presentation on why customers are important and should we, as I saw on your slide, should we talk with them? Is it necessary?
Let's find out.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to see everybody back. And let's continue from pretty much exactly the same spot where we left off the last time. So hopefully you still remember from 2 weeks ago that we were introducing innovation as something that at the core of it has the customer behavior change. So if your customer doesn't start using your product or service and doesn't start paying for that, there's pretty much no point in doing it at all. Today we're actually going to discuss what are the techniques, what are the principles, how to engage the customers and how get to tell you the truth about what are their needs, their problems, and how you can potentially help them to live their life better in a way that they're actually prepared to pay you money. Because strangely, humans are pretty strange creatures. They're generally pretty nice. However, their behavior, especially the consumer behavior, can be somewhat unpredictable. So very often, companies start businesses or start new products or services simply for the reason that they come up with an idea that seems great to company founders, because, well, they see it necessary. It solves one of their problems, probably. Or a company is simply good at doing something. So we have the technology to produce certain products, we launch them to market, and then for whatever reason, nobody is as excited about them as we are. It has happened to pretty much everybody here. I believe it has happened to me as well in various roles and positions. And the whole exercise of customer-centric innovation and customer-centric development is there to prevent this situation. So how to avoid spending too much money, too much time, too much resources on something that will not be welcomed by the customers. So the last time we met here, we were discussing together with you different types of topics that you could be working on together. Today it's very important to understand the difference between setting up a topic for the future development and setting a problem from customer's perspective. So these are very different perspectives in principles. And let me illustrate that by an example that might seem cheesy at first, but let's dig deeper into that. Have you seen this logo lately? Anywhere? Where have you seen it?
From childhood.
From childhood, yes. We have experience with Kodak products definitely from 20, 25, 30 years ago. It was a very well-established brand that produced all sorts of cameras and equipment for photography, right? Have you purchased anything from Kodak recently?
Yes.
What was it?
Photo film.
Photo film. That's very interesting. It's a retro, vintage hobby to purchase photo film. Well, you're one of the few, I suppose. But all of you who said no, you probably have bought something from Kodak, but you haven't noticed.
The glass.
No, not. Nope. 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 Nope.
Maybe.
Batteries.
Batteries.
They produce batteries today. So imagine the shift. So they used to produce cameras, and now they're somewhere in invisible business of producing batteries, and you typically don't even notice the brand so much, right? So what happened? Kodak is actually pretty famous for a story that is mentioned in many innovation books, and it's somewhat cliche, but there is continuation of that story that is little known. So years and years ago, one of the employees of Kodak came up with an idea of digital camera. The year was, I believe, 1972 or something around that. And the employee turned up to the management board saying, like, listen, I have this idea and invention to produce digital cameras that will, revolutionize the photography. What do you think? Maybe let's produce it. And famously, the management said no. So instead of bringing this product and an innovation to market, they decided to patent it for 30 years and to put the patent away in the drawer. So basically they banned everybody else, all the competitors, from doing anything similar. And they also didn't do it themselves. And it took another 30 years for digital photography to happen. So if you think about it, and those of you who are old enough to remember, the actual digital photography boom happened after 2002 when the patent was released. Other competitors were able to produce similar products, and here we are so many years later. But there's one point to this story that is not very commonly known. Why Kodak said no. Why they patented and why they banned themselves and everybody else from producing digital cameras.
Because the revenue came from photo films.
Yes, in other words, you're very correct. So the revenue came from not just photo films, but all the other kind of magical stuff that was required to produce photographs. So they define themselves, we're a chemical industry company. So our business is chemical industry. And if we produce digital cameras, it will kill all the chemical industry. It becomes obsolete and we're going bankrupt. So what is important in this story is that a company that was huge at the particular point, at some point made very wrong decision. We can look at it from this point of view and say that it was basically a wrong decision to make because they were very, very self-centered. So they defined the value that they're creating by their own perspective. Let's play for a second and imagine if Kodak would have been a customer-centric company. How would they define the value that they are creating or were creating? If, what value were they creating by producing cameras for people? They were helping to capture memories. Yes. So if you say that our company is there for helping customers to capture their memories, and you have an employee, by the way, I'm fully aware this is a Canon camera on the picture, it just looked a little bit nicer than Kodak. You have a company that dedicates their business to helping customers capturing their memories. And there's somebody who comes up to you and says, listen, I've discovered this way to create digital photographs that don't require all the film and all the chemistry and the dark bathroom. If you remember how it worked, then you closed yourself in the bathroom and did all the magic. So we have digital camera here. What do you think? Should we produce it? What would have been the answer? Of course, this is a better, easier, simpler way. So for sure, would have been a yes. And now the interesting question. So you move from this technology to capturing memories by digital photography. But what would Kodak be producing today if they were in the business of capturing memories? How do you capture your memories today as a customer? And I think this illustrates, I mean, this is a hypothetical game, right? But it illustrates so vividly what happens to a company when you define yourself by the value that you think you create from the inside. So chemical industry, and over time you end up selling batteries and nobody knows what you are anymore. Or you define yourself through the customer value. So we help to capture memories, and then yes, it is definitely a harder journey, because imagine those of you who work in companies with history, imagining the toughness of the discussion, maybe even this shift, though it's also pretty hard, saying, okay, we are closing down the chemical plants. Maybe 70% of our companies is about this, but because we see the value is not there anymore, we need to shift. Imagine how hard this discussion could be. And this is the tough part about innovation and customer-centric innovation, because at some point you might discover that the world has moved on, that the technology has moved on, and you might need to change your company to continue delivering the value. You might need to change everything that you have been doing so far. And imagine the conversation here saying that, okay, the camera thing was great, but now we need to add phone feature to it. Like, let's do that shift. So these decisions are strangely hard. So actually, a good example that builds onto that is Netflix, because do you also know or remember what was the first business model that Netflix was offering? They didn't start with streaming platform. Netflix's first business model that they were sending DVDs by mail, because the fabulous technology that launched in the late last century, when VHS was replaced by DVDs, it meant that it can be now stuck in the envelope and can be put in a mailbox. So they were renting DVDs by mail, and you could return it by mail as well, so you didn't have to go anywhere. And this seemed completely revolutionary. But what people don't know is that Netflix, similarly to the story that never happened with Kodak, they were defining themselves by the value they're creating to the customers. So they said that we're helping customers to watch movies at home, basically. And at some point, when the technology was developed enough for streaming platforms, at some point it happened, they started developing the Netflix platform as we know today. But they never stopped sending DVDs, interestingly. So they were still doing that up until 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And the interesting thing there is that, do you remember what happened in 2008, 2009? It wasn't such a pleasant time for economy. Crisis happened, right? So it was actually the crisis that made them stop doing the old thing. So what I'm trying to say is that this shift between the old model and the new model, it's actually pretty painful. And it's hard to make these decisions because companies, well, we're a little bit, well, not a little bit, but as humans, we're more afraid to lose what we have instead of like being ambitious enough to gain the new thing. So very often it takes some radical influence from economy, from competitors, from whatnot, to stop doing the old thing and to move to the new model. But to be able to do that, we need to focus on the customers and not to hold on to ourselves. I think there is an interesting quote. So this is something we were talking the last time about, but there's a quote that says nobody ever got fired for doing exactly the same thing as always. But if you do something new and it doesn't work out, then, well, there is some danger that it might be not as welcome. So yes, the hard part about customer-centric innovation is about keeping the focus on the customer and not so much on what you have been doing so far. So let's exercise this into our context. So we have this customer that we're supposed to make happy. We have some value that we're looking to create for the customer. And we want to solve a problem for the customer. However, customers are very impatient. And typically, if a person has a problem that needs solving, or some experiences some pain with some financial topics, they're not waiting for banks to come up with a product to solve it, but they're probably doing something themselves to work around it. And the hard part here is that when you bring a product or service to market that is supposed to help your customers, you actually need to, you're not filling the empty place, so to say. You actually need to change the behavior. Because if they had a problem and they have been, using their own smartness and tools available to them to solve it, then they already have a habit of doing it somehow. And now the slide that was here in front of you before, if you build it, they will come. No, they will not come because they already have a solution for this. And you're launching your product to market, and you need to change the behavior. How do you change or convince somebody to shift from the product they have been using before, or the workaround? It doesn't have to be necessarily a product, but something maybe they invented themselves. How do you make them change the behavior? Let me illustrate. So there's something that, this is, I think it's very kind of, if customer has a problem, they're not waiting for you to put the road in the right place. They're just doing what they need to do. So how do you convince them? Think of yourselves, like when was the last time you as a consumer, you changed the behavior? Like you were using something in a certain way, or you were doing something in a certain way, and then some products came to the market and you were like, yes, okay, I'm switching to this. We don't do that very often. We are really, and typically the older you become, the less you change your habits. Yeah, that's true. But there's few triggers, more specifically, there's 3 triggers that usually make us choose alternative. And for innovating, I think it's very good to keep those 3 strategies in mind, because when you will be now entering the discovery phase or looking for customers' problems, it's good to know what you're looking for. So strategy number 1 that we can be looking for, how to make things easier. And everybody's nodding in the room, so if something is so much simpler than something else, then it actually makes this jump so much smoother. Actually, an example that I don't have in the slides, but I think is very relevant here, when Apple launched the first online music purchasing platform. It's basically Apple Music. You could buy songs one by one for iPods. Still, if you remember these wonderful devices that you actually had MP3s on those. The market situation was absolutely ridiculous to launch this kind of thing, because what we were doing before, we were happily stealing music from all sorts of platforms, so you didn't have to pay for it. I think it was called, one was Kazaa, the other one was Napster. So there was a wide variety of these things where you could do it for free. And then Steve Jobs comes, gives you this platform where you can pay, I think it was like a couple of euros or a couple of dollars per song, and people actually choose paying for music instead of getting it for free. Why? It was so much easier, because if you remember the pain and the hassle that you were like downloading, and then you realized that somebody tricked you because the name of the song was different from the actual song. So if you remove barriers, then people are actually switching, and they're willing to pay a lot more. So this is something to think about. And again, Nokia demise and everything is a great example. We use it in many different cases. But here, if you look at this, what is the biggest difference, besides the button bar, but what is the biggest difference from iPhone unboxing? The user manual. This is freaking bigger than the phone. and if you remember these Nokia, they were great. I mean, probably this particular phone is probably still alive and working somewhere. But there was no way to start using it before you actually read the manual. So you had to, learn how it works. And with common phones today, you basically take it out of the box and it just works. You don't need to read anything. So the simplicity shift is huge. And the official kind of name for it in innovation literature, in innovation theory, if you will, is value chain optimization. So when we're looking at how the customer is solving their problem today, so the Kodak example, how people were capturing the memories before digital camera, right? So you bought film, you put the film in, you took pictures, you closed yourself in the bathroom to extract the film and then to kind of do all the procedures with it. So the value chain was extremely long. All the steps before you got the pictures were so long. And by using technology, we were able to make it shorter, right? So you just take pictures, you download them, magic happens. So you look at all the steps that are necessary to achieve the goal and you see which steps can we remove. Tesla, again, is a great example here. So they did a lot of things, and we can also discuss if Elon Musk is a good example or a bad example, but they have some very good approach to value chain optimization because they remove the unnecessary very drastically. So the whole automotive industry has been working in a way since the very beginning of it. There has been always car producer. They never sold directly to the end users. There is always some middleman, the dealerships and so on, which is an independent party, and then there is the end user who is sort of dealing with the dealership, getting questionable experience, and then the brand of the car producer gets damaged. So the whole value chain was kind of, inefficient. What Tesla did, they were like, but do we really need the physical spaces to sell the cars? Do we need the middleman there? And tried selling the cars from internet shop. Apparently it worked. We all know the story that at first it worked slightly too well. So they sold too many cars, but that's a whole other story. But again, value chain optimization. You don't need so many steps to solve the problem. So how can we shorten it? In other words, you could be in your projects, you could be looking at something that is already being done in some inefficient ways today, and where could we optimize things? And that could be really, it can look like a small change, but for the customers, for the users, it can create a huge difference. So this is strategy number one. There's strategy number two, which is also quite fascinating, because when we start talking to customers, many might start complaining about how expensive something is. Well, customers complaining is a whole different story. We're also going to discuss that at one point today, but making something more affordable is a very solid strategy to disrupt market. What do I mean by making things more affordable? And this will need a little bit of concentration, at least at first, because this is somewhat theoretical, but I'm going to give you some examples as well in the end. So if you look at any product category, anything really, there's two parameters for each product that you can evaluate them on. One is objectively price, the actual amount of money that you're asking customers to pay for a certain product. So that's a very solid number that is reflected on a price tag. And then there is another kind of perspective or another parameter that is somewhat subjective, the perceived value. So how valuable, according to your customer, the product is to them. And these are two different criteria because they can be in balance, but they don't have to be. Something can feel super valuable and can be relatively cheap, or the other way around, right? So the perceived value can be, let's say, super low, but for some reason it costs a lot. And then obviously nobody would buy. So for every category, there is always a reference product. So let's say a standard product. If I ask you to think of a mobile phone, you're thinking of something. So for you, I don't know, the reference product is iPhone 15 or some Android phone or a Google phone. So for each individual person, if I say a car, you're automatically thinking of something. So this is the reference product, a product that you're comparing all the other same category products to. Now, everything that lands here, where perceived value is lower, but also the price is also lower than the reference product, it's low cost. So we have these categories, right? We have the low-cost airlines, we have low-cost cars, we have even low-cost grocery stores. So there's always this group that is perceived value is less, but also, well, we pay less for it. Then there is the premium, the luxury stuff, right? Where we desire these products a lot more, and we also have to cash out. So everything that lands below this line, if you think about it, it's basically like Death Valley for product placement. So if you perceive the value very low, but the price is very high, well, you're not going to buy it. Very clear. Bear with me, I'm going to give you some practical examples soon, but it's important to understand. But there's an empty spot here, and this is the magic, where the magic happens. So think about it for a second. The perceived value is very high, so we're perceiving it high, but the price is lower. So remember, the strategy is making something more affordable, and this is what we're doing. Let's play around for a second. So if I tell you middle-class car, what are you thinking about? Volkswagen. More specifically, which one? Which Golf? Okay, Volkswagen Golf, middle-class car. Opel, what else? And Toyota Corolla. Okay, so everybody has their own kind of perception of what middle-class car is. Give me a price range. So what are we talking about? Like 20-something?
20.
From 25 to 30, probably something like this, based on the answer that you gave me. Okay, so this is our reference range, right? So this is what we're like, the whole market builds up for this particular customer around this. So if I say, what is the example for low cost? Thank you. I swear we did not agree on this, but it works every freaking time. So on our markets, and this is very culture specific because it doesn't work everywhere like this. You know, for some markets, it's something else. For some markets, Dacia is the middle class car. Mm-hmm. It's very, very perceptional. So here in Baltics, that works. What do we say goes into premium? Mercedes, again, think of Bentley is more like it because Mercedes, yes, it's a bit higher, but not that much, right? So, also kind of, well, yes, thank you for being ambitious. So something that is approaching 300,000 euros is clearly a luxury car. So this is the market of the easy part. Then maybe some of you have heard of Volkswagen's unsuccessful story with the Phaeton. Gentlemen are nodding, maybe the ladies as well, but to put it shortly, it was a car that Volkswagen launched which was supposed to be a luxury model. It was a Volkswagen with the price tag of a Porsche, to put it shortly. And again, we understand why it's not successful. They cancelled it very quickly, so it didn't fly. But because Volkswagen, you do not perceive it very high. So it's a Volkswagen. At best, it's a middle-class car. And if you're asking a premium price tag, then, well, who would ever? And nobody did so. So it wasn't very successful. But now the interesting question. What kind of brands would you put here? So before you answer, think about it. So from customer's perspective, we're solving customer's problem, and it has to provide me the same value or bigger value than some middle-class car would, but it needs to cost objectively less. Yes, no, you're not innovating. You're not innovating. This is the part. So the value is what is the customer getting out of it, right? And if the customer is getting a car to drive from point A to point B in the morning to go to work, but they don't want to pay for a middle-class car 20 to 30K, they can use City B, because you will get the same Toyota Corolla or one of those, but you will pay €3 instead of 30,000, right? Get the point? You're doing the same job, but for a lot less money. If you're having the car for driving from time to time, you don't use it in the city, but you want the car to drive from time to time to your grandmother's place in the countryside. Then in France, there is a startup called BlaBlaCar, which essentially is a co-riding platform, meaning that you find somebody who is going in the same day to the same place you need to go, and you join them. We have Facebook groups for that in Estonia, usually, finding people to go with. But they have a startup. So you pay like, I don't know, €5 or something like that to share like for the gas money, and you get to ride with them. So again, it's doing the same job that a car would do, but for a lot less money. And if you're buying a car to show off, which is also a good reason, then there is Lurento, this startup. They operate in Dubai, and I think some other countries as well, but mostly they originate from there. And what they do, it's essentially a City B for luxury cars. So if you need a car to show off at a class reunion once in 5 years, so you can rent a car from them. You can go to wherever you need to go. It does the job, and you pay maybe €200 instead of 200,000, and it's a lot more. So this is about making things affordable. You get the point? So you're not selling the same thing cheaper, but you're finding a way, how can I provide the same value that you're looking for by making it more accessible? So this is also a good strategy that you might want to look at. Probably there is many opportunities in many types of markets that potentially are still undiscovered. For example, there's a startup in the US that is called Rent the Runway. And I'm very impatiently waiting for it to come to Baltics. And what it does is they apply the same model as Netflix, as Spotify, and as all of those shared economy kind of platforms. They apply to your wardrobe. So what they do is they solve two big problems that people have, me as well, a lot, which is you have nothing to wear, and the clothes don't fit into the closet anymore. And this usually appears simultaneously. So you have like no more space to put clothes, but you also have nothing to wear. So what they do is basically they also target this area by making things more affordable. They ask for a monthly subscription fee. It starts from something like $70, and then it goes up depending on the package. And how it works is that in the beginning of the month, you get a box with clothes. You get the joy of new clothes, all the kind of emotions that come with it. You wear them for a month, and at the end of the month you pack them up and send them back, and then you get a new one. So it's a subscription base. There's always a surprise. You don't know, well, of course they know the style and they have mapped your size and everything, but every month they surprise you with some new designer items, and then you send them back and you get new ones. So I see the ladies are already super excited.
Could you remind this name of this?
Rent the Runway.
Rent
Rent the Runway. Absolutely, I'm really waiting until somebody comes up with something like this in Baltics. Still, you can already rent piece by piece, but it's not the same emotion, right? So it's not quite identical. Okay, but there is one more strategy, which is the most complicated one. So we were talking about optimizing the value chain, making something simpler. We were talking about making something more affordable. And the third one is building a product that is completely different. So sometimes we shift our behavior, or we stop using the products we were using before and start using something else because it's something else. There's a couple examples which are quite a stretch goal. So it's not very easy to copy. It's not very easy to design something like this. But since we have ambitious people here, who knows? Starbucks is one phenomenon that is objectively and rationally very hard to understand. Because why would a human being pay €7 for coffee when you can get pretty much equally good coffee or better in the other coffee shop for like €3 or €2? Like, why would you pay 7? However, there's a whole, let's say, experience dimension to it, why people want Starbucks instead of normal coffee. So somebody buys it for the responsibility of the brand, because there's a whole story that it's, responsible coffee and so on, eco-friendly, fair trade, whatnot. Somebody pays for it because it's a image thing. And I think in Baltics, for us, it's still kind of, if you have a selfie with Starbucks coffee in your Instagram, it's like, I went abroad. It's not about the coffee, but it's sending a message that I went on a trip. I'm the cool one. I get to travel. So it has nothing to do with the freaking coffee. In Berlin, I once saw Asian tourist. So I judged that it was an Asian tourist by the look of it. So they went into the Starbucks, got a coffee, went outside, took a selfie, and threw away the coffee. So it was not even about drinking it. It was about the selfie. So there is something to it, and there are books about it, and it can be deeper analysis, but there is more to it than just having coffee. It might be about branding, about experience, about something that comes around it, but note that we don't even call it coffee in many occasions. We say, I'm gonna go get Starbucks, right? So it's something else. And this is because it becomes something else, you're able to charge €7. Because in the mind of this is the important part, in the mind of your customer, they are not even comparing it to another product like this. You're not like putting in your comparison table a Starbucks coffee and I don't know what's the most common, like caffeine or whatnot. You're not putting them even side by side because it's completely different. Another category or another example of this complete different product or completely different experience. Do you own anything made by Dyson?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Heard it, but not used.
No, no. But does somebody have anything from Dyson? Yes, you do. What do you have? This thingy?
Dryer?
The dryer? How do you like it?
I don't need it.
You don't need it. It's curly anyway. Many people actually say that they have vacuum cleaners.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the most popular product. And what is interesting is that the people who get their first Dyson vacuum cleaner, after that they don't even consider like any other brand. So you say that, okay, this is my new standard. And even in shops, this is what we're talking about, that you're creating a new category. Even in shops, if you go to Euronics or wherever, there is a section for vacuum cleaners, and then in completely different part of the store, there's Dyson, because it's not a vacuum cleaner, it's a Dyson. And we also start calling, it's not even lifestyle, it's completely different product, because even when at home talking about like bring the vacuum cleaner, you don't say bring the vacuum cleaner, you say bring the Dyson. Exactly. So it becomes something else. And this is a strategy to draw. Of course it's complicated because it actually works better. Of course with the Starbucks it's complicated because there's a lot of investment into brand and the experience and the big picture. But if you manage to do it, you are able to charge 3 times more than the competitors, and the customer will be happy to pay 3 times more, and they will be absolutely excited for this product, and they will never consider alternatives again. So sometimes you can find a way to convince the customers to change because this is something completely different. So 3 strategies, focus on those, optimizing value chains, simplification, making something more affordable, and developing the technology in a way that it actually becomes completely different from all the competitors on the market. However, there is it's very easy to look at these examples here and say, they managed to do it because. When you're at 0 point, so when you're kind of starting from the beginning of it, and you're trying to look into how can we build up our solution, whether going to strategy 1, 2, or 3, doesn't matter, but how can we design it looking forward, not reflecting backward, it can turn out that it's actually a lot more uncomfortable because we need to stop talking about our product and we need to start talking about the customers and what they're doing with it. So yesterday I had this fascinating discussion with somebody who were working on very exciting and interesting product. But so long story short, they were producing some smart bed solution, and it was very complicated to stop talking about the bed and to start speaking about how people sleep and the quality of how people sleep. It's a tremendously hard conversation because it basically makes us do this. Exactly, yes. Can you find Latvia? Whoa. It's the same Earth. I swear, it's the same planet. It's just a little bit different angle. So we're very used to, when you show a map and we're looking for Baltics, it's somewhere here in general. And now what we're doing is we're flipping it the other way around. And this is what happens to businesses when we start looking at our products from customer perspective. It's the same freaking thing, but it's definitely inconvenient angle. Yes, yes, here. Yes, the bottom right corner over here. It's horribly inconvenient. So the whole exercise of customer-centric innovation is actually reminding yourself that, it's not about us. It's not how we are used to be seeing the world, but, we need to look at this from the other perspective. And it's everything else but convenient. It's pretty hard, it's confusing, and so on and so on. So let's start. Basically, when we look into innovation research or design research, as we call it, the very first thing you need to make your peace with is to understand that it's not about you and that the other people are certainly not the same as you are. So the minute you start assuming that your customer behaves or thinks or chooses things the same way as you do, it becomes very slippery slope, and you end up again in the Kodak situation, with the chemistry company thing. So you need to keep reminding yourself that other people including our customers, are very, very, very different, and they know less, they have different information, they probably know about something else that you don't know about, that the whole kind of information field and the background is completely different. So we need to empathize, and we need to find out what is their perspective. Imagining customers doesn't count. So you know, if you start kind of discussing what in theory what this person could be thinking about, this is leading nowhere. So we need actual data. We need actual data from the customers in order to be able to find out what the problem is, what are the potential ways of solving it, and so on and so on. And in theory, if you talk to companies, any companies in any part of the world, and you ask them, are you customer-centric? Everybody says, of course, yes. Like, of course, everything we do is for the customers. When you start asking them, okay, but like, how do you actually engage with the customers? What is the most typical ways that companies engage with us as users? What is the thing that also you probably get quite a lot and ignore? Sales marketing, yes, but it's not like they're not inviting you to interact, so this is one way. But when they kind of pretend that they want your opinion. Surveys. We get surveys. And, you know, how was can you rate your experience on the scale from something to something? Or also very popular these days is like, how likely on the scale from 0 to 10 would you recommend us to your friends and family? And then you answer, you're like, what a question is it? Like, I don't talk about, you know, services with my friends in general, like randomly. But then you're like, okay, 3. And then there is a meeting somewhere in the, let's say, bank. And they're like, okay, but what did they mean by this 3? What should we do about it? Like, they answered 3. It was like not 7. And there's a meeting, there's a discussion, and we try to kind of make conclusions. So what I'm trying to say is that surveys are kind of a nice declarative measure of understanding if customer is happy or not, but they're not sufficient to get information for future developments or innovation. Because what is the difference between qualitative and quantitative research? So any memories? What is qualitative? What is quantitative? So survey is typically quantitative, right? So you get questions, and then you get options. So option A, option B, option C. So the conclusion here is that if you're making a survey, then you already have an assumption of what the answer is. And, you know, assumption is the mother of all failures, because we're actually in discovery. So we're here, we're looking for this. I don't know that I don't know, right? And survey, you're probably, if you're here, then you're able to make survey, and you are able to ask a lot of people and say, yes, that 70% think our product is too expensive. Now what? But we're looking in the explore, when we're looking for innovation and options to innovate, we're looking for the corner where, you know, nobody has found it out yet, and nobody has addressed it yet. So obviously we cannot find it out by survey. We need qualitative research, meaning that we need more insights, and maybe we're not even aware in the beginning that we might find out this type of information. So I'll give you an example. Even though as a professional service designer, I do research for very many different fields and very many companies, and I should by now, after so many years, I should by now know that, you know, keep your mind open. Every time there will be a surprise. I sometimes get this, okay, how can you surprise? Like, I've seen it all, like, there's no way. And then a few years ago, I had a project for a bank in Central Europe. So it's a bit different culture. And the task was to find out, so the end goal was to design a savings product to help people save money. But before finding the solution, we had to understand how people actually manage money today before we start designing. So on the way to the country, it was Czech Republic. So on the way, me and a colleague of mine were discussing like, so what are the patterns in principle, kind of in Estonia? So how does it work? And somehow we got to the point where he said that, you know, I have no idea how much my wife earns, and the wife has no idea how much I earn. So the wallets are separate. There's some sort of joint budget who covers what in the daily managing, but in principle the money is separate. And well, maybe it's not 100%, but it's a typical case in Estonia. So it's a typical thing to do, that you're not very kind of sharing everything. So it's like usual. So we get to Czech Republic, and we start. And this is again, we discovered ourselves here. I have a lady in front of me that we're having interview with, and I'm asking like, do you have savings? And she's like, I don't know. I'm sorry, like, can you elaborate? So you're supposed to keep straight face, right? You're not like allowed to judge or anything. And I was like, can you elaborate? And she's like, okay, so every time I get salary every month, I immediately transfer most of it to my husband's account, and I think he saves. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And it turned out it's a pattern. It's not like a singular thing, but it's a cultural thing. Apparently things worked like that. So there was, okay, of course, again, not everybody, but significant amount of people do that. So I was very surprised and amazed by this. And very soon after this thing taking place, I went to speak at a conference in Ukraine. So obviously before the war. And I was so fascinated. I was saying, we in Estonia, like this is how it works, and then the cultural difference in Czech Republic, it works like that. And then there's a hand in the audience, and the guy stands up and is like, but isn't it the husband that is supposed to transfer all the money to wife's account? And I'm like, okay. So this is, of course, it's a drastical example, but you don't know that you don't know. So if you're open enough to listen and you kind of ask open-ended questions, you might find out things that, survey would never, ever give you. So what we need to do is we need to perform a qualitative research, but there's a but. As a service designer, I am convinced that talking to people is the last thing you can do, or you should do, because they lie. Some of you are nodding, you clearly have some experience with humans. Not because they want to lie to you, but because very often as a company we show up and we start asking these questions people have never thought about before. So they have not reflected on certain things and certain behaviors. They have never considered why they do things that they do. So they will answer to you some socially acceptable answer. Something that, kind of explains it, sounds good, makes them look good and smart and responsible, but it has nothing to do with reality. So before we get to talking part, there's a couple of tools that I would introduce that might be useful. First one, before talking to people, it might be a good idea to observe them. In fancy language of professional innovators, it's called service safari, but in more simpler terms, it's observation, stalking, if you will. So basically looking at what people do in natural settings without interference. Why it's important? Because when talking about some specific situation. They might be telling something, let's say, happy story, that has nothing to do with reality. I mean, this is clearly an exaggeration, right? But this is to make a point. To the softer sides, or to some, let's say, more politically correct examples, have you used this type of product in your life? Yes. Yes, I'm happy to see that people are nodding. So we're good with the hygiene. So why I'm showing you this is because the case study is the very first known, at least, story of using observation or ethnography in business settings. Once upon a time, in middle of, I think in like 1996 or something like that, company that all of us know, so Oral-B was very kind of doing super well in the terms of market reach. They were the most popular brand, everybody was buying their product, happy, shiny, and so on. But as any capitalistic company, they wanted to expand the market. And they saw that, okay, we are doing very good worldwide with the grown-up toothbrushes, but there is children as well. So there's a whole, other target group that we could reach out to and make more money. So they wanted to design children's toothbrush. And, well, the assumption was that children are basically smaller humans, like the same thing, but just smaller. So if we take this grown-up toothbrush, shrink it in size, it should work, in theory. They also heard that children like cartoon characters and bright colors. So they made children's toothbrush pinks, blue, put some Disney characters on it, and thought that, this will be perfect. And it didn't fly. So the product that was super successful for the grown-ups, for kids, did not work. Any ideas why?
Because real customers was grown-ups.
Good theory, because the real customers was the parents, but no, it was not about that. The parents were fine. They bought the toothbrush. It's the kids that didn't like it.
Because they don't like to brush their teeth.
That's also quite evident that they don't like to brush the teeth in principle, and I think there are many types of innovation as of today, all sorts of apps and gamification of this process that kind of still addresses it, but no.
They dream
Tooth-
to grow up faster.
So please note, none of the answers so far were correct, even though you have been a kid once. You should remember what it's like to be a kid. And this is exactly what happened there. So they thought that, how hard can it be? We have all been 3 years old. But, well, it didn't work out. So what they did was they hired service designers to help, and they did observations. I know that in 2024 it sounds a little bit iffy that you have a strange person coming to your bathroom to sit and observe how your child brushes teeth. But in '96 it was okay, it was acceptable. So standards were different. So, and they had observations, so they went to people's homes to see how children brush their teeth. And they understood very, very, very quickly that it's actually very simple reason why the toothbrush doesn't work. So they noticed that, the toothbrush is quite thin. So those of you, if somebody has a pen in your hand, how do you hold a toothbrush as a grown-up? Yes, but children do this, right? So when you have a thin pen and you squeeze it in your fist, it's very uncomfortable. If you have something that is thicker and you squeeze it in your fist, it's immediately much more comfortable. So what they did, what the children's toothbrushes look like today, is that they have this thicker handle, right? But I think the learning point here is that we have all been 3 years old, but we are not able to empathize as a grown-up, because we have this assumption that these users, they're just like us, And I think it's such a beautiful example. It's an old one and so on, but I think it's a beautiful example that illustrates that companies also tend to think very often, I used to be a normal person once, before I started working as whatever you are working. So I should remember what it's like to be a customer. We have this illusion. No, you don't. Because, well, this. So you have to, even though you might have been once in your customer's shoes, you still need to remind yourself of how it looks on the other side. And it might give you beautiful ideas for how the problem can be solved in a very non-conventional ways, because if you just kind of imagine your customer and think of like what the solutions could be, it would be probably very predictable. But have you ever considered why IKEA has a restaurant?
Yes.
To spend more time.
To spend more money. Eat cheap and spend more money. Or be satisfied that you ate at least.
To make you happy and have a good. In Estonia, actually, the prices in restaurants have become so expensive that I see people going on dates in IKEA restaurant, because this is like the only place that you can afford to buy your girlfriend dinner or something. But no, it was not the original idea. The original problem that IKEA was solving, and I think this is so fascinating. The original problem was that IKEA noticed that we have an issue with store capacity. So during the week, like work week, the amount of customers is X, and the amount of sales is something stable, right? So from Monday to Friday, it's kind of stable. And then comes the weekend, and the amount of customers in the store doubles, or even triples sometimes, which is logical because people have free time, they come to IKEA. Makes sense. But the sales don't go up. So it's exactly the same amount of sales as on Wednesday. What the actual hell? Because there's more people. For store, by the way, for those of you who don't work in retail, it means that your costs go up because you have to have more staff. On weekends, you have to pay them double salary in some countries. The electricity amount also goes up, and so on and so on. So your costs go up, but because sales don't go up, IKEA actually becomes, it starts losing profit instead of earning money. So it would economically, it becomes more, it would make more sense to actually close it for the weekend instead of welcoming all the customers. So what the actual hell? If IKEA would go the easy way, which is very tempting here, so the easy way would be talking to customers and standing in front of the door saying that, okay, it seems you didn't buy anything today, on a Saturday, right? So, seems you didn't buy anything today. What could we do to make you, buy more? Or why didn't you buy anything? What would be the most typical two answers? If you ask like that, then pretty much every time, regardless of what you ask about, it could be cheaper, like give it to me cheaper, which is not the game that we want to play because, well, we don't want to sell anything cheap. And then the other thing is I would like more choice, which is also a typical example. And some of you nodding, you probably have had these answers. And again, people are saying they want more choice, but we know from research that the more choice you have, the less likely you will buy anything. So this is not going anywhere. Luckily, IKEA was not that naive, so they didn't go asking. They have cameras everywhere, so it was very easy to observe. So what they conducted this service safari through cameras, looking at what are the patterns. And the patterns were very kind of copy-paste, so Saturday is quite typical. You have a family coming to IKEA. Parents, couple of kids, arriving by car in the morning, so 10 a.m. let's say. They arrive, happy, shiny, they get out of the car, and they need a sofa, let's say. For example, you need a sofa. So they enter the labyrinth. There is no straight way to sofas. You have to do the quest. So you enter the quest, and for those of you who maybe don't have experience yet, the good behavior of children in IKEA expires in about like 25 minutes. So you have 25 minutes of them behaving well, And then they start touching things, running around, getting on furniture. So it kind of becomes a little bit iffy. So what happens then? Who gets nervous? Which one?
Father.
Mother. Mother is the first one to get nervous. Father is like, who cares? But still, he'll get there. But at first, it's the mother that gets nervous. So she immediately kind of starts multitasking. So she has to handle the kids, but she also has to choose the sofa. So you have so she kind of becomes a little bit stressed, and kind of another half an hour goes by, and then the father is already like, honey, how long does it take? Can we already buy? Yeah, people are nodding, so I'm guessing you've been there. So honey, how much longer? Let's choose one. So in 1 hour or something like that, so 50 minutes, 1 hour, you have 4 people that are stressed and that don't want a sofa anymore, that are basically let's leave. Maybe next time, let's just go. So what is the easiest way to calm people down? So you throw food at them, you leave them for 20 minutes, and then magically they become nicer, right? So, and it's physiology. So when we eat, our brain gets the signal that everything is peaceful. We cannot be stressed when we eat. Yes. So that's actually the reason why in the first airlines, commercial airlines, because people were so afraid of flying, they started distributing food because it calms everybody down. So IKEA was like, okay, so we have stressed people here. Maybe we give them food because we know the place, right? So it's very particular kind of range of minutes where people actually get stressed and from where they start leaving. So if we give them food here, let's see what happens. So they built up a coffee shop, or, well, meatballs, whatnot. So if you think about your patterns, this is how it happens. You make this empty round. You don't buy anything, or maybe some minimal stuff you have in your basket. Then you see the cafeteria. You have your ice cream, meatballs, whatever. And then you make a second round during which you actually buy things. So this is how, and again, this is not very straightforward solution, but you observe what the problem is, and then from your professional competence, you start thinking, how could we solve it? And the solution is when you would have sent out the survey or you would have talked to people, they wouldn't have to tell you, I will buy a sofa if you give me food. This would have not worked, right? So you observe first, you figure out what's wrong, and then you brainstorm, what could we do to address this? So this is option 1, how to collect data. So observation, you don't interfere, you let them do what they do, you do you as it's commonly said. And then based on this, you can then come back and discuss how could we innovate. Another option is to make an experiment. So it's similar to observation, but it's somewhat controlled. So you can do, if you're not a professional in the field, you can do an experiment yourself. For example, me as a service designer, that very often I work with topics that from the beginning I don't know much about. So for example, I don't know, life insurance. I don't know how it works, so I can make an experiment because I'm basically in the shoes of a customer. I can test it out myself and see what I discover. But in most cases, we are well too aware of what the right answer is, so we cannot do the experiment on ourselves because we're too professional. So we need to take a volunteer, to give them the task and say, please try to use the service. Please try, if the same life insurance, make the life insurance claim, for example. So here's the website, you do, I observe. And then you note what they're doing. And you also might discover that users intuitively choose another way of solving things compared to what it is meant. I think, again, Dyson is a great example for many things, but one thing where they should have observed humans' behavior a little bit more before they launched the product is the hand dryers. Do you know what is the correct way to use Dyson's hand dryer? There's a correct way. So you do not stick, because what we do is we do this. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put the hands in from the side, so the airflow would kind of smooth it down, because if you're doing this, it just, gets the water up your sleeve. So again, you should observe how actual people use hand dryers and make the adjustments, or some let's say product development based on this, because your user might be doing it wrong or doing it somehow in a different way that you assume to. And I also have a story here, which is a real story, happened in Estonia. We had this store, we still have this store, unfortunately they're still functioning. And they had an issue with their clients. And the issue was that they said, our clients are having this very strange purchasing behavior. So the store was selling home renovation materials. And they were complaining that people are not buying things on the store, on the spot, but they're taking pictures of the product. For example, you want some parquet, you're making a picture at the store, then you go back home and you send an email sending, I want this product in this amount, please send it to me or send the invoice. And I was like, okay, but can you elaborate, why is this bad? And actually, the argument was very good, because first of all, it doesn't allow, let's say, the consultancy. So you might choose the wrong product and later blame the store for it. For example, if you have like a cat or a dog, then certain type of floor is not suitable for you because, well, they will scratch it and so on and so on. So you should kind of consult a person, like what is your home situation like? Do you have any children and so on? So that was the first thing. And the second thing was more capitalistic, saying that, when a person chooses material, then we would also like to make some additional sales, saying that maybe you need some tools. So when you do that via email, it kind of doesn't happen. So the upsell is tricky. So their complaint was that people are not buying on the store, they're sending pictures and buying by email. So my colleagues pretended to be a married couple, and they went to the store, saying that we need to renovate the terrace. They had a terrace plan with them, kind of pretending to be customers. So they did an experiment, and first they couldn't get an attention of the clerk, so they had to approach the clerk themselves. Nobody kind of offered them help. And they were like, we're renovating a terrace. We would like you to recommend to us some materials. We think these would work. So they chose some flooring. And the guy was like, yeah, these are good, but you know what? Take a picture and email it to me. So it wasn't the client who was stupid. And the fun part? The guy who asked the client to email, he was present in the meeting. When we were discussing, I wonder why these customers are doing this. Because they are told to, but it didn't turn out before the experiment. So you might find out very interesting things about customers' behavior, about, again, service people behavior, about very many things. So experiments can be quite good insights into why people do things that they do. When you have observed your clients and realized very many things, when you have done the experiments, you might get a lot of questions in your head, like, why do people do what they do? And this is the point of design research. So one thing is just kind of observing the fact of how people behave. This is one thing. And we can learn a lot from it, for sure. But for innovation purposes, because our task, remember, is to change the behavior. This is like why we're doing the whole thing. In order to change the behavior, we need to understand why they currently behave as they do. So we need to understand the motivation. And this is the tricky part where you need to talk to people. But to get them tell you the real reasons of their behaviors and the real motivation, and to open up, you actually need to approach them in a certain way. If actually, I heard a great example yesterday from one of the guest speakers, that if somebody comes and asks from you, like, what is your D vitamin level? You're like, I don't know, normal? or something. So probably you would not be able to answer this question. But if I start kind of in a softer way asking like, how much time do you spend outside? Have you traveled to any warm country? Do you eat certain foods? Then I will get this information without confusing you, right? I will get my answer. So very often companies are way too blunt. Yes, they might do interviews, but they ask questions straight ahead and expect the answer that customers actually don't know. So interviewing people is a bit trickier than it sounds. To get the answers right, first of all, one fundamental thing that we need to remember is we need to remember that in interviews, we are not talking about a product or a service, but we are talking about the context. So again, a good example from yesterday, when in Lithuania, in the innovation program, we had this discussion about, so you're designing beds that helps people sleep better. If you go and interview your potential customers, you should not be talking about their beds. You should be talking about their sleeping habits, right? You see the difference? If you're designing a solution that helps people to, I don't know, get rid of pimples, you shouldn't be going and talking about their kind of what cream they're using, but you should be talking about what kind of problems they're facing and how the pimples are doing in a sense. So you need to talk about the context and not so much about the product, because this talking about the product will give you ideas for minor improvements, but it will not give you ideas for innovation. That's the huge difference. So when we're going into interviews, first of all, we're talking about the big picture. Second thing is we need to be asking questions that are open. What does it mean to have an open question?
Where you can't answer with no and yes.
So, which invites you to tell you a story, basically, and it doesn't allow you to answer just yes or no. So that's an important part. And again, as I said, we're trying to find out why people do things, right? So we obviously, ideal interview actually is when you ask one question and then person just tells you, like, tell me, how did you buy your last apartment? And then they just kind of talk for 1.5 hours, tell you, every single step. Of course, it doesn't happen in real life, so you have to kind of have some additional questions and kind of help the conversation to go forward. But in ideal world, this is what you're aiming. You're asking less questions and you're listening to whatever comes to person's mind, because they will tell you what's important, and you might not even know that you need to ask something. Just listen whatever comes. But, so, open questions. There's one very important open question that you are unfortunately not allowed to ask in the interview. Any guesses? The question is why. And this is very interesting because we need to find out why, right? So this is the whole purpose of the interview. We want to find out why you do what you do, but we're not allowed to ask it. Because in any language, in any culture, why question feels very, let's say, very abusive in a way that you need to justify yourself. Like, tell me why you don't work out. Like, and then you need to, I'm healthy anyway. So I think it's a childhood trauma that, when you broke something, then your mother showed up and was like, why did you do that? And you felt you had to justify. So in order to get this motivation out of the clients, we need to rephrase it. So essentially what I do in the interviews, I try to ask questions like, please tell me more about the reasons. Or tell me about the motivation, or what made you decide like this. Essentially, it's all why questions, right? But it doesn't feel so attacking, so you don't have to kind of protect yourselves. Another trick that I would recommend to use is people are especially if you're talking to a person that you don't know, which hopefully is the thing that you will do. You will not interview your husband or wife at home, but you actually will reach out to real people, real customers. When you're talking to a person that you don't know, it might be that they're a little bit protective, so they would be, again, giving you socially acceptable answers and not elaborating about their in-depth feelings and stuff so much. So what I do is I try to ask the important questions in different forms at least 3 times through the interview. Of course, you need to rephrase it, but essentially you're asking the same thing. The reason for that is that as humans, we are very afraid of looking stupid. I think we can all admit it. So we're very afraid of looking stupid, and one thing that makes us, according to ourselves, not to others, but according to ourselves, makes us look stupid is when we repeat ourselves. So the customers that you interview, they are also a little bit afraid of repeating themselves. And if you keep asking them the same thing all over again, they have no other choice but to kind of elaborate more in other words and, you know, to expand the topic. So if the first answer is kind of very on the surface, very politically correct, then the second and third one, they start opening up and they start kind of, you know, talking about things that might be somewhere deeper and that might be more informative for you. So, you know, don't be afraid of asking the same thing in different angles several times. It might give you very interesting insights. What else? Let's imagine you have a customer that doesn't want to talk to you. We're in Baltics, I mean. So it's like if you go to some southern countries or to the US, it's actually very easy to talk to people. They will like talk you to death by themselves. You don't even need to ask them anything. In Baltics, it might be somewhat tricky. So people might be even to the open questions, they would be answering very shortly. They will not be elaborating. The trick there is to shut up yourself, first of all, because we have this human trait of filling the awkward silence. So if you are brave enough not to, like your customer stops talking and you don't feel the immediate need to kind of immediately start talking yourself, but you give them space, and you can ask like, and what else? What did you not mention? Or you just, actually my favorite trick, you just repeat the last couple of words of their sentence in questioning tone, like you just bounce it back to them, and you shut up, and they start talking. And try it. It's a very interesting. You can try it at home today. You don't have to go to customers. And I swear, even the people who know that trick, they will fall into this trap as well. So it's very interesting. I, as a horrible introvert myself, we are approaching Christmas period when there will be a lot of all these Christmas receptions, and the only way how I get through those is basically you ask one question from somebody, and then you keep repeating these 2 last words of the sentence to them for the whole evening pretty much, and they end up talking all the time. So they don't understand where the trick works. And what is especially interesting is that they will remember you as the most pleasant conversation partner of the evening because people like talking. So they will enjoy that you pay so much attention and show so much interest. So keep that in mind. Try it out. First time it might be a little bit tricky, but when interviewing your customer, this is gold. One thing that I would like to caution you about is when talking to customers, it's super tempting to go and ask questions, how much would you pay? Or if we had this or that, would you be using it? Or any types of questions that are hypothetical and directed in the future. It's super tempting because, you know, if the customer says yes and plenty of customers say yes, then of course we should do the product, and then you do the product and nobody buys. But you all said yes. What the hell? So customers are not able to predict the future. it's understandable that we, as service providers or as companies, that we seek in this interview, we're looking for this security that, you know, all the customer says they want it, so let's do this. Remember, in the exploration phase, we're looking for problems. We're not asking for what the solution should be, because customers are not able to predict the future. Like, as much as we could. Think of yourself. You wake up on the 1st January morning, and somebody asks you, tell me, how do you plan to live this year? And you absolutely, honestly believe, at this particular moment, that you will stop drinking. Very, like, you're convinced. You will start eating healthy, you will lose weight, and you will sign up to go to sports club. And on this 1st January morning, you're absolutely sure. So you're not lying in the interview. You're convinced that this is the correct answer. However, somewhere around 10th of January, we understand that, yeah, no, maybe next year. But you get my point, right? There is no point of asking the customer. They might be believing that they're telling you the real thing, but they're not able to predict their own behavior. So again, the slide that I think illustrates that point beautifully. We all know how Apple Music ended up. We all know that we are now renting music, even though somebody told in all their belief to Steve Jobs that they will not be renting it, but still. So interviews are for finding out how are people behaving today. So what has happened until now, and not for, you know, looking in the future. That's very important. So talk to people, try to find the reasons and the motives for their behavior, for their choices. We're looking for patterns, like the IKEA example, right? So we're looking for patterns of where the people are like having issues, having problems, and then we will come back. In the next times, we will come back and find out how we could possibly solve it. But let's not talk about the solutions yet, because we don't know what the customer perspective on the problem is today. So let's look for that one. And don't be afraid. In the future modules, we will also talk about the second part of the equation, which is finding out if the solution that you have come up with is actually a good one. We will have different tools, different methods for this exercise, but it will not be about talking. So what is going to happen, basically, I think is, again, a Philips example is a beautiful example from how customer research differs in the explorative phase, and this is where we are now. So we're exploring the problem and the opportunities, and in the validation phase. So when you already have a solution and you want to try it out if this is a right solution for the problem that you found. So Philips was launching a speaker on the market. A portable speaker on batteries. They were testing all sorts of different features of it, but there's one very important feature was the color. So they wanted to know what kind of color it should be. So they did an experiment, and the experiment was designed in a very clever manner. They did a focus group. And by the way, focus group in general is not a very informative thing, but it was not about the focus group as such. So they invited people to the room, and they discussed the speaker, discussed its features, and one of the questions was, what kind of color speaker would you want? Can you guess the most popular one?
Black.
In the focus group, everybody wanted a yellow speaker.
Yellow.
Yes. In the focus group, they were looking at pictures saying, yellow is the most beautiful, I want yellow speaker. So, after that, but this was not the experiment. This was just kind of, let's say, preparation for the experiment. So everybody wanted the yellow speaker, but after that, they sent a thank you letter saying, thank you for your time. We really appreciate the feedback. And as a thank you gift, we would like to give you the new speaker. Please choose the color. And now everybody who said yellow, choose the black one. So this is another chapter, right? So we will get there, but don't go there just yet. We will get to prototyping, we will get to business experiments, but this will happen in the future. Today we're not talking about the solutions, we're not talking about predicting customer behavior when we have the solution ready. Today we're looking for the problem that we could possibly solve so that we do not repeat the story of Kodak that we discussed in the beginning and don't end up producing batteries because we're very convinced in the value that we create, but we're looking actually out to the customers and we're making sure that we are creating value for them, and the value is enough to change the behavior and hopefully make them also pay slightly more. So thank you very much. That's it for now.
I would still ask you to join because I do have a few questions from our viewers. So you mentioned about changing the value chain. So how to know that you're focusing on the value and not something on nice to have thing?
That's a super good question because it's actually quite complicated because the whole construct of value is very different from customers' perspective compared to the perspective of the company. So if we look deeper into this, and I don't want to answer this question with another lecture, but so with every product or service, there's this 3 blocks of value. So there's functionality, there's emotional value, and there's social value, which is a bit more complicated, but basically, how do other people perceive me when I use this product? And I think nice to have danger is happening when we talk about functionality. So the customer is generally not very impressed by the car driving because it expects it to drive. So it's sort of, and as a company or as a service provider, we might be focusing on the driving qualities slightly too much, ending up with the nice to have features. However, from the customer perspective, it's important to discover this, not so rational parts of the whole thing. And generally, this will be the key to building a whole bigger value in a sense that, well, Starbucks and all these beautiful examples, so it kind of creates more value in other places that we as professionals tend to expect.
Perfect. I will read the next question as I don't want to butcher it. So what is the most effective way to ensure that the client-centric innovations for businesses remain adaptable to evolving customer needs and market trends?
It's actually a very hard exercise because, let's face it, genuine, and I mean genuine, not declarative, but genuine customer centricity is a pretty big effort from companies' side, and we are able to pull ourselves together and do this exercise once, and then we're going to go, done. And then magically 5 years passes, market changes, customer change, but we haven't found it's in ourselves this effort kind of to repeat it all again. So this is a whole other avenue of managerial practices where you make sure that this culture of customer discovery, it moves from this, let's say, one-time big event that everybody's like, wow, let's talk to the customers for once, into daily practices where it becomes kind of the new normal that, it doesn't have to be much, but we are reaching out, we're talking, we're keeping this contact. When this shift happens, companies typically change dramatically, but again, if it was so easy, everybody would be doing it, so it takes a bit of dedication and efforts and time for this to go into the culture.
So somehow to conclude that innovations and customer centricity is not a one-time thing, but it's a culture thing. It's your habit, kind of.
I have this one metaphor that might actually relate to some of you, is that when you decide that, okay, I'm going to start exercising now, like you have this decision 1st of January that we were speaking about, like I'm going to start exercising, and then you get a gym ticket. You go to the gym and you're suffering because it's hard, it's sweaty, and it's painful. And then the next morning you wake up, everything hurts. You look in the mirror and everything is the same. And you're like, what's the point? Innovation and customer centricity is exactly the same too. In order to see the difference, you need to do this painful and nasty thing for quite a bit of time for it to start making some impact and change in the business. So we kind of realize it with the exercise part, though we still don't follow it very often. And with innovation, it's slightly less evident. So we hope that this one time going to the gym will actually fix everything. And when somebody asks, are you customer-centric? You're like, yes, we did customer research once. So what else do you want from me? Yeah,
exactly. So we need a creative discipline in this sense.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much for this lecture. Pārslēgšos uz latviešu valodu. Paldies visiem klausītājiem un skatītājiem, kas pievienojās šai lekcijai. Nākamā 3. izaugsmes programmas lekcija ir 3. oktobrī, kur mēs liksim kopā, tad saprotot, ko mēs esam ieguvuši un uzzinājuši no klientiem, kas tad ir tas nākamais solis. Paldies, ka pievienojāties, un lai jums ir izdevusies diena!